The Rothschild's Surrealist Ball in December of 1972 was held at the lavish and decadent home of French socialite Baroness Marie-Helene de Rothschild and her fourth cousin/husband Guy Rothschild in France. The chateau had 80 guest rooms, a 120-foot central hall. It had acres of forest and a table that was so long it could seat 74 people. The home was inspired by the Midmore Towers in Buckinghamshire, which was used for the masked ball scene in Eyes Wide Shut. Some of the movie The Ninth Gate with Johnny Depp was also filmed at the chateau. Guy Rothschild was head of a Rothschild's bank, and the Baroness was known as the queen of the Parisian social scene. The invitations to this ball were printed backwards, so you had to use a mirror to read it. The guests were told to wear black ties, long dresses, and surrealist heads. Once the guests arrived, they were welcomed by moving amber floodlights that made the chateau appear to be on fire. Once the guests were inside, they were greeted by butlers that were standing along the entire staircase, and they were purring and pretending to be cats. Next, the guests had to pass through a maze that was made with black ribbons that resembled cobwebs. And if a guest was to get lost in the maze, one of the cat butlers was there to guide them. And lastly, they were led to the tapestry salon, where they were greeted by the Baroness and her husband. She wore a giant stag's head that was decorated with tears that were made out of diamonds, and Guy's headdress resembled still life art on a platter. The tables were decorated with plastic dolls, taxidermy tortoises, and the plates were furry. The forks were replaced with dead fish for some reason, and the dessert was a nude woman made completely of sugar. This party sounds insane to most people, but these events were very important. It was so important that one person threatened to take their life unless they were invited. Now, regarding surrealists, they believe the rational mind represses our imagination. So the surrealist movement was about releasing the potential of the unconscious mind. Regina K. Walters was 14 when she ran away with her boyfriend, Ricky Lee Jones, who was 18. They were planning on hitchhiking to Mexico, so when a seemingly friendly truck driver offered them a lift, they didn't hesitate. Unfortunately, instead of starting a new life in Mexico, Ricky was killed almost immediately, while Regina spent about a month in a makeshift torture chamber in the back of the truck driver's cab. His name was Robert Ben Rhodes, and he was also known as the truck stop killer. He was suspected of assaulting and ending the lives of more than 50 women between 1975 and 1990. This photo was taken minutes before Regina's death. And it's a picture that once I saw it, I couldn't forget it. He cut her hair and he made her wear this black dress and heels. And if that wasn't enough, he tormented Regina's father by calling him from payphones as he went from one truck stop to another. He told her father that he had made some changes and that he had cut her hair. He then admitted to leaving her in a barn, and then when the father would ask if she was still alive, he would hang up. He found Regina's father's number in her notebook. A farmer found Regina's body while he was preparing to have the abandoned barn burned down. Regina had been strangled. And during the trial, the prosecutor said that when Rhodes walked into the courtroom, he felt true evil. Raymond Theodore Robinson was born on October 19th in 1910 in western Pennsylvania. On June the 20th in 1919, when he was 8, he touched a high-tension wire that led to a transformer that powered a trolley system, and he was electrocuted. This happened because he was reaching for or climbing to get to a bird's nest at the top of an electrical pole. There were 2 voltage lines. One was carrying 12,000 volts and the other was carrying 25,000 volts. So it isn't known which one he touched, but regardless, his eyes were burned out and he sustained terrible, terrible burns on his face, his hands, his arms, and his body. His nose was gone and his lips and ears were disfigured. He was rushed to the hospital and almost died, but within 2 months it was reported that he was still alive and was in good spirits. A part of one of his arms had to be amputated. Raymond went on to learn Braille, and he earned a small amount of money by making doormats and wallets from used tires. Because he was disfigured, people were afraid of him, so he would go for walks at night on State Route 351 to get some fresh air. Some people that saw him referred to him as a monster, and others would call the police on him. Some thought that he had escaped from a mental hospital, or they thought he was deranged. They just didn't know his story. Teenagers would use him for their entertainment. Boys would try to scare their dates, while others would kindly bring him beer and cigarettes. And this would give him the social interaction that he craved. Some even posed for pictures with him. He was said to be a very good person. He also encountered cruel people. He was once given a beard that someone had urinated in, and some would offer him a ride, and then they would just leave him out in the middle of nowhere for him to try to find his way home. His family did worry about him, drinking and walking along the road. Raymond became an urban legend that turned out to be true. He's known as the Green Man and Charlie No-Face. Because his nose was an open wound, it often became infected, which caused the green color. He never discussed his injuries or complained about his problems at all. It was simply his reality, and there wasn't anything that he could do to change it. He died on June 11th in 1985, and he was 74 years old. This photo was seen on August the 5th, 1948 in the Vedette Messenger, which was a local paper in Indiana. The caption read, "A big for sale sign in a Chicago yard mutely tells the tragic story of Mr. and Mrs. Ray Chalifou, who face eviction from their apartment. With no place to turn, the jobless coal truck driver and his wife decide to sell their 4 children. Mrs. Lucille Chalifou turns her head from the camera while her children stare wonderingly. On the top step are Lena, 6, and Ray, 5. Below are Milton, 4, and Sue Ellen, 2. As the caption said, they were struggling financially and were about to be evicted, so they came up with the idea of selling their children, including the baby that Lucille was carrying at the time. She was 24 and Ray was 40. Each child was sold for $2, which was about $25 in today's money. After the story ran, several people gave the family donations and offered to adopt the children, but the parents refused. 2 of the children were sold to farmers that changed the children's names. At the farm, the children were often chained up in the barn, and when they weren't chained, they were forced to work long hours on the farm. This is why they were purchased. Their adoptive father would sometimes call them slaves. Fortunately, the farm was close to another sibling's home that had also been sold, so he was able to visit them and he would untie them in the barn. Lucille would later go on to remarry, and she had 4 more children, and she never gave them away. When some of the children went to see her later on, she didn't show any affection towards them, and she didn't regret letting them go. 3 of the siblings were able to reunite before their death. On November the 13th, around 9 p.m. that night, the Nevado del Ruiz volcano erupted and sent hot ash and lava into the sky. Less than 3 hours later, a mudslide swept through the village of Omayra, Colombia, trapping thousands and destroying everything in its path. The mudslide was triggered by a melting ice cap, and it moved at a speed of roughly 25 miles per hour. And for about a mile, the city's roads, homes, and bridges were completely destroyed. One of those trapped was a 13-year-old girl named Omayra Sánchez. She had been pinned down by her own house and was only able to move her head and her arms above the water. Rescue volunteers from the Red Cross, as well as local residents, tried to pull her out, but her legs were trapped by a brick door and her dead aunt's arms underneath the water. On top of that, the water just continued getting higher and higher because it just kept raining. For 3 days, rescuers tried to free her, but unfortunately she died slowly from gangrene and hypothermia. She passed away on November the 16th. Her mother received the news of her daughter's death during a radio interview. The photographer said that in regards to the photo, he felt that the only thing that he could do to help was to report properly what happened, and he hoped that it would mobilize people to help the ones that had been rescued. As many as 25,000 people died, which was most of the town. Jeffrey Hunter, 22, sent this text to his mother as he, his father, and his stepmother took shelter from an F4 tornado. They were in a bathroom in Valonia, Arkansas, and this took place on April the 27th, 2014. His mother was 20 miles away when she received the text. She kept texting him, "Are you okay? Are you okay? Let me know." But she didn't receive an answer. Jeffrey's father and his stepmother survived with serious injuries. Jeffrey, unfortunately, didn't, and he was his mother's only son.